All right, it's 8:05. Looks like we are ready to begin. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining. Today we'll be talking about network security as we see it as a network service provider. And so we're excited to talk with three really engaging people from Zayo, which brings three different perspectives on how we secure different facets of the technology landscape. So overall, the core webinar purpose is, network security, as we believe, is a core tenet of a strong technology posture. I think we all believe that. We spend a lot of time here at Zayo, and as we're sure you do, spend a lot of time thinking about how you secure your networks. It's something that we do right from the foundational piece of everything we talk about, all the way through to delivering network services to our end users, our end networks, and all of our customers. And all the different exchanges and digital interactions we have, we're always thinking about security. So we think about this three ways. One of the most important ways we think about is securing data, but also very importantly, securing people. And how do we deal with identity management? So we'll get into today how we talk about different ways to secure things in identity, zero trust, how that works with SASE, how that works with our core network, and how that kind of translates to the cloud. Second thing, we're going to hear a little bit from Aaron WERLEY today on how we're securing our core network. So we're really excited to talk about some of the different terms there. And then the last thing is how are we securing interactions between those users, the networks, and kind of the outside world? And so, lots of different great topics there to talk about today. So there's a few different things that we're going to go through and a few different use cases. First use case here is the nature of work is becoming significantly more transient. And, hybrid work is something we all talk about, right? 5 years ago, we all went to an office. We had a box that secured the network traffic. That was perimeter security. That worked fairly well with a firewall, and we connected it to the cloud. But, obviously the nature of work has changed very rapidly. And we're all excited to be working from different parts of the world, but also, that is also now presenting new challenges, right, for our security teams to secure people where they are. So traditionally, security limited ingress and egress points, and you use perimeter solutions to solve that. And so years ago, MPLS networks were hidden, right? They didn't have many egress and ingress points. And it was fairly easy to secure because it was private networking. But as that started to change and the internet started to become more, a staple of how we connected, and people started to move around the world more, it became increasingly more difficult to secure. So our CISOs are challenged with, the hybrid nature of work a lot differently than they were many years ago. We're going to hear from SHAWN Edwards today, who's the Zayo CISO, who thinks about that for Zayo and for our end user customers on how we're doing that. There's a lot of innovative companies out there that are now trying to solve this problem. You see a lot of the SASE companies creating agents to work on, laptops of end users that connect into SASE platforms and things like that. And Zayo's been, working on this for many years, organically and inorganically. We've bought companies and we've built products to solve some of this complexity. So we're excited to talk about that today. Once that traffic kind of moves into our core network, we have our DDoS options and other things to secure our networks. One of the things we're going to hear about from Aaron WERLEY today is RPKI. We're really excited to talk about that from a service provider landscape. We think we're in rare air there on, securing BGP networks, and interconnectivity between service providers and customers. So lots to talk about there today. A few use cases. We're going to kind of weave in a little bit of healthcare, a little bit of financial, a little bit of other things to talk about private networking, redundant networking, things like that. So excited to get into it. So this discussion today will largely talk about security at different networking layers. So we're going to focus on three major things. We're going to focus on the edge or end user. We're going to focus on the core, how we're securing our core network, right? And then we're going to talk about how we take that out and we secure interactions between kind of the outside world. So excited to get into that. We have three great panelists with us today. So first panelist, we have our SVP and CISO from Zayo, SHAWN Edwards. Welcome, SHAWN. SHAWN is responsible for securing our core network, our end users, and thinking through the challenging use cases of how not only we secure our core for our customers, but secure our network for all of our internal and external users across the world. So really exciting perspective there. SHAWN, thank you for joining us today. We're going to talk, and Shawn going to kind of lead us through, what he thinks about on a daily basis, what keeps him up at night, and what we think, y'all should be thinking about from kind of a CISO perspective. So Shawn, thank you for joining us today. Second, we have Ed Lovelace on. Ed Lovelace is our Director of Product Management for all of our Edge products globally. Very engaging person to talk to. If you haven't talked to Ed about Edge, he's very passionate about it. So I encourage you to do that. Ed is an extremely well-rounded player, wakes up every day thinking about Edge security, and how do we really improve our solutions. Ed is, a 5-tool player here at Zayo, and I think one of the brightest minds we have. So really challenges our leadership team on pushing us super hard towards, secure solutions. How are we expanding our Edge platforms? What are we doing from network-based SD-WAN? What's the next thing we're going to be kind of conquering? So incredibly lucky to have you on today, Ed, and really excited to be working alongside you. Obviously, you're going to bring a wealth of knowledge to the security conversation. So excited to throw some tough problems your way. And last, we have Aaron WERLEY on. Aaron is the genius of our lit network, runs the entire network here at Zayo. I believe one of the key reasons to Zayo's kind of long-term success, but Aaron is our Vice President of Network Technology, runs everything from keeping the lights on to all of our innovation automation stacks, and probably one of the best knowledge holders here at Zayo long-term, and probably one of the brightest minds in, service provider networking out there. So Aaron, we're very excited to work with you. You've done a tremendous amount in network security in our core. You're constantly innovating in and around our Wave platform, our packet platforms. And so, I encourage all of you on the webinar today to ask all 3 of our panelists kind of, 3 different questions, thinking about networks, edges, and CISO perspectives here, and really challenge us to answer things in a deep way. I am Frank CITTADINO. I am our Chief Technology Officer moderating the webinar today. Our 3 panelists are far more technical than me, but I'm very lucky to work with all of them on a daily basis. So with that, why don't we jump in? I also encourage all of our attendees to ask questions, which are questions in the chat, please. That would be fantastic. We want to make sure that this is an interactive webinar and you're getting the most out of it that you can. So we're excited about jumping in. So let's get started. Okay. So let's get started with topic number 1. First topic here today is, what does it mean to secure people? I think there's a wide array of variability when we talk about this topic, but a lot of the times we talk about demographically where we are in the world and geography based, how we're going to connect. And so distribution of the workforce is something that has been challenging, more challenging in the past 5 years than it's been in the past 10 years, right? People are starting to move around a lot more. We've all heard in the news, commercial real estate is, going down in value because people just are not going back to the office, and people are working from home, working from, shared workspaces or coffee shops or things like that. And we believe here at Zayo, productivity is remaining high and increasing, which is fantastic, but it also presents challenges because we're on shared internet connections. So I think the first question we want to kind of stick out there is we're going to hear from Shawn Edwards a little bit. And Shawn, why don't you give us your overall perspective here on distributed workforce, identity? How do we secure people that are kind of transient moving throughout the world?
Yeah, sure, Frank. So I think, the need for a distributed workforce is just commonplace nowadays, right? Like it just is what it is. I think with the pandemic we all went through, I think that just really changed the way our landscape has. Opened up a lot of exposure and increased our footprints on what we need to protect as organizations. Some of the things that I think, right off that kind of come to my perspective on this is, end user awareness and training. It a lot of time doesn't get a lot of visibility, but I really do think that that's one of the key areas to really help improve our security within our organizations. They're our first line of defense, our end users and our customers and our partners that we work with every day. And so making sure that that interface is actually secure is of critical importance. And, moving through the chain, I think the defense in depth strategy, while it's been around for a long time, it still rings true. You need to have a layered defense model. And that comes in different ways, right? One way is basically, obviously, from the inside out is the endpoint security, having strong endpoint security capabilities, things like endpoint protection, antivirus, encryption, device and system remote wiping and data protection capabilities. these are all imperative to kind of protect the actual endpoint, which is the next up that lane. Also, identity access management, right? This is critical as well, right? Being able to protect our organization's data really comes back to who has access to it. And so with that, putting IAM tools in place to control our user permissions, implementing the right level of safeguards around those identities and what they have access to in their whole life cycle is really important in that sense. And then, of course, near and dear to our heart, right, is around network, right? Network segmentation, building up network resiliency, building up network enhancing securities like DDoS preventions and threat mitigations. All these areas are critical because that's going to be the entry point into your organization, whether you're doing traditional castle and moat architectures like you would see with a VPN solution, or if you're actually going to more like a SASE kind of capability or cloud enabled capabilities. So I think that those are kind of the key areas that I would focus on. So again, endpoint, identity access management, network, and of course the users, right? Those are all really critical components when you're looking at a dynamically dispersed workforce.
Awesome. Thank you, Sean. I appreciate that. Great
Sure.
perspective. Talking identity, I think, is a huge buzzword these days in the market. I think we talk a lot about zero trust. Briefly before we move on, I think I'm going to ask you and Ed this question. On the spot here quickly, give us a 1 minute blurb on zero trust. What do you think about zero trust? What is zero trust to you, and how does a typical company leverage zero trust?
Sure. Maybe I'll start and I'll pass it to Ed. I think I'll be honest. I'm as much on the business side as I am on the customer side, and so I have maybe a little different world perspective of it. I've always had trouble with zero trust because I felt it was overused as a marketing term. The reality is, though, when implemented properly and done well, it changes the game for your organization. Little things around everybody's concerned about third-party risk, vendor risk, right? This is, supply chain attacks. Those have been around for a decade, right? And they're still really hard to fight against, right? You can do it through contracts and agreements, but the reality is the boots on the ground or the actual practical application has to come from something like a zero trust model and building out an architecture that way. And really, I can tell you that something even here at Zayo that we are looking at as far as our organization goes is we put those vendors in a different bucket than the rest of our organization. Very simply, the idea there is that they don't need access to everything that an employee would need access to. When you have the traditional castle moat architectures, you don't have that flexibility and that granularity to implement those controls. It just really ups the level and is almost becoming table stakes nowadays in the organizations to have that zero trust models. So, in my opinion, I think if you look past some of the marketing and you look past some of the actual fodder that comes out of the use of zero trust, the underlying design and need of it is crucial to any organization.
Awesome.
I'll pass it to Ed.
Sure. Yeah, and Ed, on zero trust, I think from an edge focus, we hear a lot from our vendors kind of, touting zero trust in front of us that they could do all of these things. Give us the thick and thin on zero trust from an edge perspective.
Yeah, I feel like zero trust is the new cloud, right? Everyone's got the zero trust sticker on their stuff, and it's kind of the new thing. It works great on a PowerPoint, works great on a whiteboard. It's easy to write the 4 letters on a thing and make it look really good. It's hard though. It's really hard to implement unless you're greenfielding an entire company from the ground up. Zero trust, the premise is if we don't know what you want, you don't get it. But if you actually enable it, everything breaks, right? The reality is anyone that's been operating for a while has no really good insights into what's truly being passed across the network. So a lot of the journey, it's not zero trust first, it's observability into the network, it's understanding the application of the users, who's doing what, where, when, why. Only then can you start kind of back solving into, okay, partial zero trust. We're going to trust a lot of these things and not trust these things, and slowly the number gets smaller and smaller and smaller. So zero trust in reality is very messy to implement, but like Sean said, end state, it's really, really great. It's a great model, but it's really hard to get there. And there's a lot of iterative steps to get there. And we see a real journey, which is kind of the fix the network, get better connectivity, get better visibility, understand what you actually need, start to break things a little bit, a few screen tests to see what users actually need. And then you can actually really define your zero trust model. Then you start to tighten it up, and then you actually have something you can enforce and be really rigid about. So there's a real journey there to zero trust actually being functional and useful.
Yeah, agree. And so, identity and zero trust go hand in hand, right? Obviously, zero trust is driven by identity, extremely important, right? But as we continue to talk about identity, one of the questions that I have in my mind is, as the transient nature of work continues to expand, right? People continue to move all over the world. It's suffice to say that at some point, robust connectivity in different parts of where people are not going to be super strong. Okay. And Zayo's for a long time prided itself on high performing networks, big pipes, big customers, which we're still proud of. And we're a very strong infrastructure company. That is Zayo, and that's what we do, right? How do we take end user, right? We've made big investments into the edge, we made big investments into kind of like managed services. How do we take those end users and deliver the same amount of high performance to them? What are we doing in the edge to take identity and tie it together with high performance?
Yeah, so really this is the epitome of the SASE space, right? You're talking about SD-WAN or WAN solutions to take that high performance edge provider network and extend it to the messy edge where the user actually sits. If it's a premise, that's something like an SD-WAN or some kind of overlay technology to secure branch to data center to cloud, whatever those endpoints are. And then the SSE portion of the SASE stack really is looking at how you go the next step down to locking the access to the user, right? Again, on the ZTNA thing, it's starting to understand who's doing what, who needs to do what, and starting to implement that more user specific departmentalization maybe first, and then user segmentation, and then down to the individual user as you kind of start to phase that out. Allows you to now understand who, what, why, when, and where, and then start defining user experience and routing those applications to the user experiences using different technologies to get it to where it needs to go the best performing way, even if that's over multiple accesses or overlays or private connectivity, depending on the path that makes the most sense.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think, we're going to continue to see the proliferation of SSE away from SASE. I think that's going to be next. I also think we're going to see a lot more investment into, identity-based next generation VPN solutions. So I don't want to say VPN, but I think VPN was a great start to connect people, but as Sean said, that was the castle moat theory a lot, right? And I think it's going to start to blend towards zero trust, but zero trust with, performing enhancing mechanisms to drive really high performance, because that's what SD-WAN did. If we look back, SD-WAN commoditized networks, right? It decentralized the MPLS network and allowed, a highly secure, highly performing connection over a common grade, internet connection that was lower cost. I think that next revolution is probably going to happen at the end user, because the typical end user connection today is find an internet connection, add a security agent and a VPN. We feel kind of good about that, right? And I think the next step that a lot of customers are thinking about is going to be in zero trust. And I think, there's going to be a lot of innovation that goes around that. So we're excited to see the innovation for that, next revolution. I didn't want to bring AI up into this conversation because it's about security, but I'd be remiss not to do it. So I encourage our panelists, our attendees to ask any questions in and around AI. I want to say that Zayo is taking a very strong stance around AI. I'm leading our AI strategy, so I'd love to hear any AI questions when it comes to identity. It's seemingly every day we see a new security company pop up that says the three big buzzwords, right, Ed? Kind of like zero trust, AI, correlation type stuff like that. I know we talk about it a lot, but would love to hear perspectives from our attendees. So, all right, so that's identity. We believe identity is extremely important. Zayo is making great investments in and around identity, but we also run what I believe is probably one of the best core networks in the world, and probably defensively one of the best networks in the United States. And Aaron, you built one heck of a network, across the United States that's continuing to get better. But let's talk about securing our core network, right? We've got in our core network hundreds of thousands of fiber miles, right? We secure POPs all across the United States. We've got routes at 400 gig. You've done a fantastic job of doing that and moving traffic very quickly. And I think we fight with the top the top service providers in the world for who sets the fastest speed records. And so, I feel like we've got some really cool trick car in the salt flats in Utah sometimes with you, Aaron, setting speed records. But, it's exciting to watch you do that, but it's also really exciting to watch you guys secure the networks too. And I think from our perspective, you can't have one without the other. So I think from your perspective, Aaron, let's start high level. We set speed records. We've got great fiber. We've got a next gen network. we believe that we can take customers where they want to go at any capacity. But what is a secure network from your perspective at high capacity? That infrastructure, customers that want to buy infrastructure should think of is really the way we want to frame this up.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. We do love speed records, we love distance records, and we love doing cool stuff with the network. But security is absolutely top of mind when we're architecting our network. And I think it goes beyond just sort of the common strategies, like zero trust and identity management that you guys mentioned before. If I am one of our customers, I think it's a broader goal or a broader lens than that. Like I need to also look at my partners, right? Especially those that are responsible for carrying my traffic across public or shared networks, right? How can they help me secure my data, make sure it gets from A to Z without being compromised? So what Zayo is doing on that front, I'll bucket into maybe 3 different points here. We do extensive testing from an architecture lab perspective to ensure that we're providing transparency and privacy of our customers' data end to end. That's absolutely critical with any of the services that we provide, right? We want to make sure that our customers' data isn't modified in any way, isn't potentially exposed to any of the other customers that traverse our network. And we're not putting our customers at risk. We can do that just with our core services, but then also Zayo has a couple additional sort of features or capabilities that I think are worth calling out. One of which is our private dedicated networks. And that's exactly what it sounds like. This is where Zayo sales engineering experts come out, help our customers understand what exactly it is that they need to from a communications perspective, and build purpose-built networks for them. All the infrastructure from fiber, equipment, you name it, is dedicated to that customer. So you really can't get much more secure than that, than having completely dedicated infrastructure. That's one thing. Separate, we offer end-to-end encryption, and this is at a layer 1 perspective. It's damn near impossible to eavesdrop or to capture any data when it's encrypted at a layer 1 perspective. So that's a add-on offering that Zayo has made available now for several years on our Waves offering, and that's just a sample of what we do from a services and sort of core products perspective. Second item I touch on here is going to be being a good steward or a good member of the internet community. So Zayo is a tier 1 network, has a major impact on all data that traverses the internet as a whole, not just our customers' data. And one of the things that we've recently rolled out here was RPKI. You mentioned it in your intro. Something that we're really proud of. We certainly weren't the first, not the last to get there, but we felt it was equally important, and have been rolling that out here across our network over the past couple of years. And what that does for us is that helps our customer base, as well as just the broader internet community. It protects them against route hijacking, and route hijacking is a material issue right now, and it's both malicious and accidental, right? So some of the biggest route hijacks out there, whether it's intercepting cryptocurrency streams, or it's redirecting major websites traffic to steal customer information, that happens almost on a daily basis. And then separate, like on the accidental side, it's so easy for typos to redirect traffic towards networks that aren't the host of that information, and then suddenly that causes the actual owner of that information, their service becomes unavailable as a result, right? So we see it all. RPKI helps prevent that, and it's something that we are proud to go and implement. And then furthermore, on top of that, we took it a step further. One of the things that we also made a recent post about here is our 2FA for BGP changes. So beyond RPKI. RPKI is not necessarily going to cover everything. It also requires everybody to participate for it to be successful. But ensuring that customers are making changes that they're allowed to, they're doing so on resources that they have permission to, we thought was also important. So Zayo rolled out a 2FA solution here where anyone that's peering with our network or announcing routes to our network, we ask, we've implemented a 2FA process where we'll go and send a unique code to the points of contact associated with those IP resources to ensure that they actually have, call it permission to be able to announce those routes. So it's a additional step there, and security definitely a backstop, but something we are quite proud of and we think will go a long way.
Awesome. So you covered a lot of awesome things there. I mean, we're doing a whole bunch of secure, obviously, routes in our network. Let's go back to private dedicated networks for a minute, because I want to make sure that everyone on this webinar today doesn't think that that's an MPLS network. Okay. And hey, we just kind of have private routes over our core network. This is a truly private dedicated network. I mean, from layer 1 all the way up. And so, I mean, just break it down, Aaron, just simply, we were talking private fiber, private waveguide, private everything all the way up. So this is something Zayo could do, I think, very unique. But, one of the things that I get excited about is the performance conversation of this and the security conversation of this, because at the end of the day, hey, look, Zayo is an infrastructure company. We're not a service provider. Okay. And people like to clump us into this service provider thing. We're not. We are an infrastructure company providing ultra high performance solutions at really high line rates. And so talk to me about private dedicated networks.
Yeah, you hit, I think, a couple of the main points behind it there. It's definitely high performance, high security. The most shared aspect of a private dedicated network is perhaps it's in a shared cable, right? So the fiber, the actual strands of fiber that we use are dedicated to that customer's network. It never touches shared infrastructure. The design for that, that specific service or that network that we're building often avoids even Zayo's major pops, right? We will route fiber directly between customer locations, which does two things. Again, going back to performance, you have the shortest path between 2 points, as well as security, right? You're limiting the amount of fiber exposure, the amount of points at which traffic can be intercepted. And then moving up the stack to the equipment, we will go and take those dedicated fiber strands and we'll layer on top, whether it's optical equipment, packet equipment, whatever's needed to be able to support the customer's services. This is a solution that's had great traction with the financials, the healthcare industries, the school districts, you name it. Anyone where that performance, that security is absolutely critical to their day-to-day business. And you mentioned the big pipes. The amount of bandwidth that you can get from a private network is almost endless. It's tens of terabits of capacity, and it's something that I know my team does. We get really excited about building network like that. So those customers that have those sort of capacity demands often lean towards our private network solution.
And I think that's where we win. I mean, you start to look at, serving the growth in internet in America just broadly, right? Zayo's positioned to continue to win there. We have an extremely dense network, and it's exciting that we take that to the next step of, encrypting wavelengths. Me and you talked about this, 4 or 5 months ago. And as I was entering the CTO role, I talked about, alien waves and encrypting waves and, how do you not, share waves on a, spectrum on a fiber, things like that. And how are we, securing spectrum? And, it's exciting to watch us continue to innovate in that space. As a teaser, I'll leave this webinar short of some of the fun stuff we're doing. But if anybody on the webinar today wants to have a one-on-one with Aaron about how we're encrypting waves or alien wavelengths and things like that, I encourage you to reach out, because I think it's a really interesting thing that, Zayo's on the forefront of doing. So, Aaron, summing some of this stuff up, we hear a lot of really fast or first positions, right? We're, ahead of the game on RPKI, multi-factor authentication on BGP, encrypting spectrum on wavelengths, right? we're one of the only companies that are going to build private dedicated networks, with ultra high capacity. So guys, one of the reasons that, when I came into Zayo, I was so excited, A, to work with Aaron because I think he's tremendous, but I think B, I really do think we have incredible focus around driving an amazing core network, one that we can leverage awesome edge solutions for, and then tie in cloud connectivity too. So I think one of the things that Zayo is doing, Aaron, on the other side, is I think we're going ultra high line rates towards the clouds, right? And so, we've been working with the top cloud players out there to take 100 gig and 400 gig networks, and even, starting discussions on 800 gig networks towards the clouds, whether that's, dark, lit, or packet networks, right? The cloud connectivity is almost limitless. And so one of the things that we're continuing to talk to our customers about is, A, decentralization, and then B, distribution, right? How do we kind of like decentralize out of one cloud to a multi-cloud presence with ultra high performance and really strong security? That can be really difficult for the larger user, right? That's relying on a strong core network. I think Zayo's, positioned well to do that. And if you tie that in with, Ed's team on bringing in everything from the edge, you get a very robust posture on how we can connect, multinational corporations globally. So I think that's really exciting, but I think that also opens up a threat vector, and that threat vector is DDoS. Okay. And, we're not done talking about all the cool things you did do in the core quite yet, Aaron. So over the past 3 years, there's been about a 600% increase in cyber crimes. Now, I'm not going to quote that because everybody will tell you a different number. So the thought process here is that there's about, 30,000 or so DDoS attacks a year. I probably think it's significantly more. Okay. There's a lot that we don't know about, but we're going to continue to see a lot more. Why? People are using internet significantly more, right? Zayo is one of the key backbones of the internet. We're the 8th largest internet provider globally, that we're on lots of lists for that. But when you start to think about it, that also opens Zayo up to how do we secure our customer networks for DDoS? So let's talk a little bit about that. People tell us that, the average DDoS attack costs businesses around $200,000. We can dispute that fact for the rest of time. Some customers pay a lot more, some customers pay a lot less. But even smaller businesses still have to recover from DDoS. And a lot of the time, the smaller businesses don't probably have to think through DDoS. Their service providers doing it for them. And we are doing it for our customers, right? This is something that we naturally secure in our core, but customers can also buy higher levels of DDoS protection, right, in our network. If we see a DDoS attack coming through our network, obviously Sean's team works with Aaron's team to protect our customers. So, one of the things that we're thinking about, is how do we think through network-based attacks? Sean, why don't you give us kind of your perspective on technically what happens in a DDoS attack? Give us some of the perspectives, what is DDoS, first of all? What are some of the common DDoS attacks that are out there? And how does the Zayo IP service really protect our customers?
Yeah, sure. So I think, firstly, just on the DDoS attacks, distributed denial of service, right? These are where you have a large set of hosts or assets or devices out on the network that are specifically targeting a network or a network service or a capability that you have in your environment. They use the many to attack the one or the limited. And so with this, the idea is you're simply overwhelming the capabilities. There can be many objectives related to DDoS, and DDoS has been around for many, many years. It's not a new threat vector. However, I would say that it has continued to change over the years as it's been a cat and mouse. As many of you know who are in the security space, you do one thing and then they shift it 15 degrees to the left on you. So traditionally speaking, these are simply just floods. They would throw a whole bunch of connections down your pipe, down your internet connection to an asset or to a system, and they simply wanted to put more bandwidth down the pipe than you could handle, thereby denying access to those services and capabilities. However, over the years, these have changed and modified, right? So we see these amplification attacks. These are common where they see the home routers have not been patched, and they basically use those to actually amplify the amount of requests that come out. Or they will actually have the situation where they'll spoof, they'll hide, they'll act like they're coming from a source. So then you respond back to the wrong source, which then actually responds back to you and creates basically another form of amplification that you'll see. Obviously botnets, we've probably all heard about botnets over the years. They have the botnet for hire services where you can pay some Bitcoin and just say, go go hit this business or this capability for 30 minutes with this amount of volume based on how much you have in your Bitcoin wallet, to actually go and attack a service. And it's a paid service, a business really. They have tech support, chat bots, everything you can imagine when you go to these pages nowadays. So it's become almost like a small business for some of these threat actors. Some of the areas that really probably concern me more, or that I have seen that I find harder to fight against, really around the application attacks, right? These are not looking for volumetric in the sense of just flooding. They're looking to overwhelm the processing of an application. They may go after a web server or the backend calls to a database servers and try to get an app to make database calls. And with that, they craft very specific type of request packets, but a lot of them still. And then what ends up happening is the application just can't handle it, right? So while your network pipe is, thanks to Aaron, for example, is multi-terabit, right? But at the same time, the actual application then is the next choke point, right? And it can't manage the volume of application requests or the complication and the computation that's required in order to process those application requests. You know, this is seen quite a bit. There was this DNS water torture attack. That was what it was called. And basically in that, they flood a domain name server with a large number of requests, and therefore it can't respond to legitimate requests. Again, very similar tactic, but then you can no longer serve DNS, and therefore your sites and your capabilities to deliver those sites go down. These are very common attacks nowadays, unfortunately, and they're done more by advanced adversaries. So these are groups that basically want to target and bring down applications. And I think, you know, Frank, I like your comment on the numbers, right? You could look 20 times on Google and get 20 different answers, right? I think the reality is that we're being attacked every day. Everybody is. I've been in this industry over 20 years, and it's constantly happening, right? I think fortunately, two things. One, the pipes have gotten bigger, so we're able to handle more. Hopefully some of our compute has moved to more cloud-based computing, which actually opens up a lot of flexibility and expandability in our compute capabilities. I think this has offset a little bit, but the cost is still there. And I think that's what a lot of businesses miss, right? You're paying for this, whether you know it or not. So putting in protections, putting in controls, putting in scrubbers and scrubbing of your network traffic is still instrumental, right? You still need this capability because you're going to pay for it whether your service goes down or whether you're paying it for it with compute and network costs. So it's definitely a value-added service for any company.
Awesome. Thanks, Sean. I think one of the most interesting things that I think about here is, yes, and then you mentioned it, right? Aaron is building giant pipes, which allow giant volumetric attacks. Okay. So kind of double-edged sword. One of the things is volumetric is one thing, but the second thing is abnormal traffic patterns, right? And not only do we just see like a lot of traffic coming across the network, but it comes through at abnormal rates to try to subvert our typical mitigation techniques, right? What's an example of an abnormal traffic pattern?
Yeah, sure. I mean, some of the encoding capabilities that we've seen where they make requests that appear to be legitimate, but there's actually a subsequent request that's encoded inside the payload. So traditional, you know, network, not to get too technical on it, I guess, but you have basically the header and the payload of any traffic. So what happens is when you unwrap the first one, then there's an option for a second one. Well, you can actually encode and roll up more within that. That can actually cause us to bypass some very simple type of control capabilities. Also, you know, there's, you know, specifically with web traffic, you know, there's different types of commands like post and get, for example. So using post commands has been a more recent activity that we have seen recent in, I say, like 3 to 4 years, where there's been a lot more post commands, and that causes the actual request to be sent in almost like it's a response to the asset. So it's not a traditional just give me a web page or give me a connect to a port. It's actually doing like an application request for the post commands. So those are some examples of ones I've seen. That's like an application layer. If anybody's interested, there is one you can look up called Slow Loris. That's actually a good example of a post command attack.
So you've got people sitting around with Postman posting things across the internet.
Yes,
via API
exactly.
Some API gateway on Amazon.
APIs is a whole nother space. Yeah, you could go on endlessly for another half hour, and that's a bane of my existence, if I'm being honest. But that's a tough space.
I hear you, right? Obviously, we're all in technology, right? And we're all writing code all day long, but code security is extremely important. It's something probably we could do a whole webinar on, and we're not going to get into. But I think we touched a little bit on, there's a wide array of different attacks coming out there. It's not just coming across the network. So,
Yep.
Which makes it really hard to secure, right? I mean, Aaron, talk to us a little about how does our DDoS service work to stop abnormal traffic, right? Shawn talked about encapsulation, right? We've got packets kind of in different encapsulation techniques coming across the network. Years ago, we installed Arbor devices that customers and service providers had them, but talk a little bit about how DDoS service works here at Zayo.
Yeah. So first off, I'd say Zayo has the best partners in the industry from a hardware technology, a solution perspective, and our DDoS solution is no exception. Right. So we've partnered there. You mentioned Arbor, among others, to help build out Zayo's DDoS solution, and essentially in its most basic form, I think it was mentioned a little earlier. We monitor the traffic traversing the network and look for abnormalities that would signal there's an attack going on, and that could be volumetric, it could be different traffic profiles, things like that. And when the system identifies those sort of situations occurring, it will automatically redirect traffic to our geographically diverse scrubbing centers. And our whole goal in this is to really get the traffic as quickly as we can to the scrubbing centers to get cleaned and return the traffic back to the actual destination. Return the clean traffic back to the end destination. The goal there, or the outcome of that is you get all that traffic off the network as quick as possible before it ever hits any of the smaller interfaces, especially those facing our customers, and ultimately then cause impact. Now, this is something here that Zayo's made significant investments over the past several years. We've continued to grow our scrubbing capacity, add additional scrubbing centers, throughout the United States and Europe, to really harden and increase the robustness of our DDoS solution. As a result, I think our customers have been able to sleep well at night, knowing that it's something that we're supporting for them, and it's something I feel like has been a good success story for Zayo over the past few years.
Awesome, thank you, Aaron. I appreciate this. So, Ed, DDoS in the edge, it's obviously important. It's got to come through a core network, but eventually that attack has to land somewhere at some edge. We've done a great job of partnering with different companies that seemingly, help to mitigate DDoS, especially around the edge. Why don't you talk to us about DDoS in the edge, and what are we doing, in our edge solutions?
Yeah, no, it's a very interesting space. I may get a bit of vendor hate mail for this, but you have to think about the problem and scale. There's a lot of people selling small office boxes, and they say, it has a anti-DDoS feature, which is great. And I'm not saying it doesn't work, but if you have a 100 meg link going to your office and you get a 1 gig DDoS attack, I don't care how much scrubbing you can do on the 100 megs that makes it through, you're still dead. So there's a lot of thinking about using the right tools for the right job. Zayo's DDoS solution is core network. It is at the scale of Zayo. It's on our edge. Whether it's using something like FlowSpec to do giant filtering, or in-depth scrubbing to do real DPI, manipulating the bits to really see what's going on. It'd be able to leverage that massive scale. It's an arms race today. Be able to upstream fix the problem so that the stuff that's coming to your site is clean is critical. So assuming you've done that, you've taken the thought to kind of look at how you protect yourself upstream. You've now gone to your edge. There's a lot of questions about if the DDoS is successful, what do you do? So resiliency is a big debate. If this is critical services, what's your backup plan? Everyone wants to sell a solution, but if that solution doesn't work, what is your plan? So sometimes that's multiple carriers, it's failover, it's resiliency, it's overlays, different things like that. Another big thing to consider as we look at this space is the things that aren't sexy. Everyone's thinking DDoS and they're going to take our website down. If I want to hurt a company, I don't take their website down. That's just going to annoy some users. I'll go after your Active Directory server, or I'll go after your VPN server, because your entire business grinds to a halt because no one can connect, and you're done. Or your SIP or your PBX. Those things that aren't really pretty but essential to your business, those are critical. We saw a lot of customers trying to get attacked there, and go ahead.
Yes. So I bring up a question. It's 8:49, so we're coming down on time.
Yeah.
So, we partnered with a vendor recently, CloudBrink, and I wanted to bring them up because, they're doing, mutual TLS 1.3, which I think a lot of people are starting to upgrade to. But I think one of the interesting things, there's a question here that came in. I want to start weaving some questions in. With generative AI being used by attackers, what are we doing to stop it? Can you talk a little bit about, that partnership and why that's important for us and some of the features that our customers are getting from and some of the things how that partnership's connecting customers back to our core?
Yeah, for sure. So CloudBrink's really unique, and they have a concept of ethereal edge. So they have basically an ever-moving edge surface that's dynamically spun up, moved around to enable where the user is to support connectivity for a short period of time, and it moves around. So the idea of kind of moving the whack-a-mole around to avoid to lower the attack surface is advantageous to kind of get around those generative attacks where you kind of have a known list of targets, you just keep hitting it. So if you move the target, it's a lot harder to hit as quickly and move it around. But in that case, a user is not just solely connected to one point and hard fixed they're connected to multiple points, kind of like an SD-WAN. I always like to explain that CloudBrink is like an SD-WAN to the client, where you're connecting to multiple gateways, you're doing multiple paths, you're moving traffic around to fix underlay issues. But in doing that, if there is an edge that gets hit, you just take it out, spin up a new one, and move the traffic dynamically. The user is none the wiser. So be able to be flexible in that attack surface and moving it around based on actual measured performance allows you to mitigate and kind of respond to those things.
Awesome. Yeah, I appreciate that. And the reason I bring up they're new, it's a new spin, right? It's not kind of a perimeter-based spin or a VPN solution. It's something new that, I think it's interesting. So, all right. So 9 minutes left. I want to answer some questions, but first I'm going to shoot some rapid fire questions out to our panelists here. I'm going to ask this to Sean. Sean, what's the one thing that our users that our attendees today should walk away with?
Yeah, I think really that, to me, every network looks different, right? Every business need is different. And I think that, when I've looked at different organizations I've stepped in, you have to really kind of evaluate, definitely from a security perspective, what is it you're protecting? There's a lot of things you can just take like the standard boilerplate, but that works okay, but you really need to kind of customize for your organization, right? And I think that, it's one of the benefits that Zayo brings here is that, we design your network, and you're not doing it on your own. So we can focus not only what you're needing right now, but what's coming down the road in the future for your growth and as your organization matures. I think it actually really helps to have a partner like Zayo in that. So you really do need that customization when it comes to not only network, but the security side as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Sean. So let's answer some questions from our attendees here. Aaron, this one's for you. Probably a simple one. On the DDoS mitigation, is it inherent to our network or is it a paid service?
Yeah, it is a separate paid service, but it is also something I'd say where there's kind of a power in numbers there, right? Everybody benefits from having the DDoS capability, because it basically removes that malicious traffic from the network as quick as possible, prevents congestion of any of the backbone links.
Got it. Okay, so I think to go further, it's inherent in our network, but for the customers to enable the feature, it becomes a paid service.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so it can be done very quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And which, Ed, I love that point because some customers, when we sell them internet, they're like, I don't want the DDoS. They get an attack and they're like, Aaron, we want the DDoS. And so, right, we go at it on the fly and we help them black hole their traffic, things like that, which is, always funny. So buy the DDoS, everyone, because I think it's very important if you have, big pipes and you're expecting volumetric attacks, it's something not to ignore. Okay, so another question here. I think this one's for Ed. Ed, where do you see the biggest potential for AI use cases in your network? And I don't say AI ML because I think that's saying, vanilla and chocolate ice cream. You know what I mean? They're both kind of ice cream here. I think the term is called like largely moving into, AI. But where do you think the largest AI use case is in our network and our network operations?
So I think the biggest win for us is AI ops. It's taking AI, machine learning, all those things together to bring sense to the chaos. A tier one ISP has a lot of telemetry, a lot of noise, and you got to be able to make intelligent sense of that at scale. and do it faster than a human can. And you have to be able to scale that. And AIOps is fundamentally the most efficient way to bring scalability to your operations. And that's a huge thing for us. On the edge, we use it extensively to operate a very, very complicated customer networks with correlation across thousands of locations, and be able to roll that down to it. Here's what went wrong, go look at this problem, versus here's all the noise, try and figure out what broke first. And that's been, massive improvement for us.
Yeah, fantastic. And there was one question in here, Aaron, I think it's a big one for you. Is just, what are our thoughts on staff aug model for data centers? And so when it comes to distributed workforces, any thoughts on that?
Staff aug model for this.
Yeah. What is your staff aug model for data centers? What are our thoughts on that?
Well, I guess you're always going to have, if I'm understanding the question correctly, I don't think you can have 100% distributed workforce for data centers. You're always going to have the boots on the ground, the local, hands in front of and eyes in front of the equipment. However, the operations piece of it, that can certainly be, distributed, especially with the tools that are made available today. You can have, management from afar, but no matter what, you can't get to 100%, remote or distributed workforce for data centers.
Great, thank you. So everyone, that's the end of the questions. If anybody else has a question, feel free to lob it in as I talk here. But to wrap everything up, I think the things that we're very focused on here at Zayo is we want to lead the world and lead the United States being a very, very strong infrastructure provider. We believe we've got one of the best fiber networks out there, and one of the best lit networks that sit on top of that fiber network, right? We made great acquisitions in the edge to bring you guys very strong managed services. And we put all those three things together. We encompass that in an edge, core, and cloud strategy where we could take your traffic from your end user all the way to the cloud and back. And our goal is to secure that the best way possible. Since we are an infrastructure company, we do partner with the best of breed security companies and try to tie those in the best ways to deliver your traffic securely with the best performance we can. So taking this away, please feel free to reach out to any one of us. Sean, Aaron, Ed, or myself would love to talk to any of you about what we're doing on our network, how we're thinking about innovation. We're extremely excited about what the future holds. We believe the transient nature of work is going to continue to proliferate. We think Zayo is very well positioned to be able to help you, right? We think we've got one of the best networks out there. And if you don't believe us, let us show you, because I think it is something really compelling. So thank you all for joining today. We appreciate all your time, and we hope to talk to you all soon. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.